Hi again, this is Angie with Grandma Creates, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different using my sewing machine. I've had my sewing machine for about a year now, and I've made a few things with it, and I'm excited to make these quick and easy blankets for my grandkids. So I made a couple of these so far, and I want to show you how I made these. You'll need to make these cute, easy blankets are just a sewing machine. I have a Brother SE400, and it's a sewing machine and an embroiderer all in one. I'll just be using the sewing part today. A self-healing mat. I have this one. I believe it's 18 by 24, and it has, if you notice the marks on here for the angles, you'll need to have something like a ruler or something to cut a 45-degree angle, and that's what I use. Like I said, self-healing, so I'll be able to cut on this. You'll also need, I got 1.5 yards of Minky fabric from Walmart, and I'll put some links down below for find them on Amazon, and put some links down below for you, make it a little bit easier for you. This, I will be cutting it down a little bit, so I'll show you how to do that. I also purchased a 1 yard of fabric, so I believe these were like $4 when I bought this one. I'm going to make a blanket for my grandson. He loves Batman, so I'm going to make this for him, and I'll be using this yard of fabric. And this here is 100% cotton, so I'll be using that whole thing for that. You'll need a straight edge ruler. This is not actually for measuring and cutting. This is for designs on your shirt straight, but I'm going to use this for cutting today. I don't have a quilting ruler, so one of these days I'll get one of those. You'll also need a good pair of scissors for cutting fabric, or you can also use a rotary cutter. So I have a rotary cutter here. You'll need some scissors for cutting the thread. So these actually came with my sewing machine, so I really like these. They're really sharp, and you can get into the sewing machine for the thread. You'll need a marker. Now this marker is a Sharpie. You won't be able to see it, but you will need to draw some lines on the fabric. You can use fabric marker, you can use a pen, just something. Like I said, you won't be able to see it, so I'm just going to use a Sharpie. And then you'll need some pins. So that's all you'll need to make this cute blanket. Stay tuned, I'll show you exactly how I do that. Okay, now that the material has been washed and dried with no dryer sheets or fabric softener, and I pressed it with my heat press. If you have an iron, that'll work too, especially the heat press doesn't use steam. So an iron might work better, but I don't have an iron. I only have a heat press. So anyway, I got it all pressed. I laid out the Minky, laid out my fabric on top. It does not have to be perfect because we are going to trim the edges of the Minky. We're going to make them about 3 inches further than what your material is, the top material is. Whenever you do get this type of material, don't worry about cutting this part off. I'm not sure what that's called, but the little white part, that doesn't matter. It's going to be hidden. So, and the more material have, the bigger the blanket. So this is actually just going to be a little kid's blanket, so not going to be very big at all. But what I'm going to do now is, the key to working with Minky is to pin as much as you can. I usually pin about 1 inch, 1.5 inches apart. So that way the Minky won't slip. In my sewing machine, I do have a needle that will handle where it won't slip. I believe it is a 16 by 100, something like that needle. Anyway, so I'll look that up. I'll put it in the video. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin this, and then I'll trim off the fabric, the excess fabric, and then we'll get to sewing it. I do like to pin with my pins facing this way, outside of that, with the head facing on the outside of the fabric, on the rough edge, only because when I trim it, it's just and I sew it, it's easier for me to take the pins out. I like to take the pins out. Either way, however you want to do it's fine. If you like to sew over the pins, that's fine. But I like to take the pins out, and it's just easier for me to just take them out this way rather than towards the bigger part of the fabric. So I'm going to just start in the middle. And then I'm going to go to the corners. And then I'll pin in between. And I did forget to mention that whenever you're putting them down, put the Minky with the good side down and the fabric with the good side down, so that way you're putting the wrong sides together, because you're not going to be turning this blanket, so you can put the wrong sides together and sew it that way. Okay, now what we're going to do, we have it all pinned up all around, and we need to trim this excess Minky fabric underneath. So what we're going to do is just get a measuring, you can get a measuring tape, just anything, and we're going to measure 3 inches all around. So I'm going to use my Sharpie, and I'll use my straight edge to measure it as well. This may not be the best way to measure, but it works for me. Really need a table that's a little bit bigger. Maybe when I get my new craft room, I can get a bigger table. Right now, I'm just using the kitchen table, but it works. Okay, now that we got everything cut and trimmed, ready to go, we're going to go ahead and sew. And we're just going to sew the side using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to just sew the fabric to the Minky for right now. I'm using a silver, just a silver thread for the top, and just a white thread for my bobbin. I'm just staying along the edge of the fabric, the top fabric. And also use some fabric adhesive, temporary fabric adhesive, between these 2 layers to hold it better if you're having trouble with the Minky. In the corners, I just go to the, let's see, I'll go to the edge and leave the needle in the down position, lift up and pivot. And if you're a beginner like me who has trouble sewing straight lines, this is actually a perfect project for you, because you're just following the edges of the rough edges of the fabric. So it kind of keeps you where you're following straight lines. So like I said, this is a perfect project for you if you're a beginner like I am. I'm going to do 1 line in the center and probably 2 lines on the side, and then going vertical, and then the same thing going horizontal. The first thing that you want to do is make your lines in the center so that way nothing shifts on you. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And I just eyeballed the center. And if you find some material that has the lines, that'll help. This one, I'm just going to kind of use the patterns and use that to figure out where the center is. And then you back stitch. And then you keep going. And you really need to use both hands with this. And you just want to go from one edge of the fabric to the other edge of the fabric. Don't go all the way to the end of the Minky. And once you hit the end of the fabric, go ahead and back stitch. And then go to your next side. You want to kind of smooth your fabric out as you go. So this is one of the fun parts. We've got everything all sewed on the blanket. The fabric is attached to the Minky, so you can take out all of the pins. Those can all be taken out because it's nice and secure. Now we're going to work on the corners before we put the binding, which is going to be a self-binding blanket. And if we just turn the corners and sew like this, it's going to have a lot of bulk. It's not going to look very good. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut a diagonal line, 45-degree angle, and you'll see the nice finished product. It'll look kind of professional, I think, so I really like it. So let's get started. Now, if you had a quilting ruler, which I do not have, it will have 45-degree angle on it. So you'll know exactly how to cut it. However, I do not have one yet. So I am just going to try to eyeball it. And the other two came out okay, so I'm going to see if we can get this to come out okay. So what I have been doing now, this little ruler, it has a little tip here where I can see through, and I put it about a ½ inch past the tip of the fabric, and then kind of make a diagonal line. The thing about with Minky, it has this these divots here, so I kind of use that for my guide to make sure I have a straight line. So I'm going to go ahead and just mark that. Now you can cut this, or you can also use your rotary cutter, which that's what I'm going to go ahead and do today. So if I cut it with scissors, I would need to put that mark, but since I'm cutting it with rotary, I probably didn't have to, but I went ahead and did it anyway to show you. Okay, so you do that on all four corners. Okay, now that you have cut the four sides, what you'll need to do, and it'll look like this, what you'll need to do is to put the right sides together, and we're going to sew about a ½ inch seam allowance on here. So you'll just do right sides together, that'll work, and just sew along this line right here, and we're going to do that with all four corners. So there's the right sides, put those together, and then sew along here. I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and the end. And this is the last seam, and I'll show you how it works. It's pretty neat. So you just kind of push your finger through the hole here to make a nice sharp corner, and then you would, when you turn it around, it makes a nice, like a frame for your blanket. So isn't that kind of neat? So yeah, we're going to do all four, push them all through, and then what we'll do is we'll kind of roll up the edges and pin all of the edges. It's probably about probably a quarter of an inch, something like that, and pin all of those to the fabric, and then we'll be done, and I'll show you the finished product. You want to make sure you get the very edges of this fabric, because we're going to sew along the very edge of the Minky to attach it to the fabric. So you just want to get to the very edge of the Minky and make sure it goes under to attach to the fabric. And the corner, when I get to the corners, I like to pin them diagonally. So kind of just from here to through here. And if you have trouble with your Minky like folding up on you, a good tip is to start pinning in the middle and then pin on each side and then pin in between those two. And it kind of keeps your Minky to where it's a nice clean edge. Now everything is pinned, and I'm ready to sew. And where you're going to sew is just at the very edge of this, as close as you can without going over into the fabric, just to the very edge of your Minky line. And this is the last time you're going to sew, and then you'll be the blanket will be complete, and I'll show you how it turned out. Okay, you're going to back stitch as you begin, and then continue sewing all the way around. And I would recommend you keep your speed setting, if your machine does have a speed setting, to a 2, like in the middle, so you're not going too fast through here, because you do need to watch the edges, make sure they're rolled under where they need to be. And then back stitch again. Okay, I'm at the edge of the corner, so you just need to make sure your needle is down, and then you pivot. Okay, so we're at the end. So go ahead and back stitch. And we are done. So make sure that you check in there are no more needles, because that would not be good to give to your grandkids, and there's needles in the fabric, so we're gonna double check that. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to make a self-binding blanket for your grandkids. It was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, and hit the subscribe button down below, and let me know in the comments, have you ever made a blanket like this, or do you sew? I know I am still a beginner, but so far I am loving every minute of it. So thanks for watching. Until next time.